Welcome to Backtalk Live. I'm Tom Hardigree. I'll be your co-host. I've got another host tonight. I'll tell you about, but I want to say Larry that called last week. Larry, you were chastising me in a friendly way that I ought to talk about something other than the same old stuff that I talk about all the time, which is the local government and how they're spending money. I got one now that will knock your socks off. Alex Newman. He is with the John Birch Society. He does a lot of things. I'll just tell you this. I have something written down. He has a BS degree in journalism from the University of Florida with an emphasis on economics and international relations, as well as an AA degree in foreign languages from Miami-Dade College. He is co-author of the book Crimes of the Educators and currently serves as foreign correspondent for the New American Magazine and advanced economics teacher at Freedom Project Academy. I don't know Alex except I met him tonight. I know of him. What he's going to talk about is pretty controversial, and we'll get into that. You can text, and of course, Alex is. We may get texts that are unrelated to what we're talking about, but because this is a call-in talk show, so we'll take questions about anything you text in or call in or whatever you'd like to do. This have a little tad of controversy, so get ready. Go ahead and put your seatbelts on, and we'll have a good time. We'll be right back. Hey, Lee, what you doing?
My air's quit working. I'm gonna call McGee Heating and Air.
Wait a minute. You got a screwdriver? I know a good bit about this. I can walk you through it. Won't take but a second. Should have called McGee Heating and Air.
McGee Heating and Air. Comfort you can count on.
Welcome back. Alex, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be with you.
We're going to be talking about education. There are a lot of people, in the country who are concerned about education. A lot of people, I don't think there's any issue that we all agree on. And a lot of people will say that the education system is just fine. A lot of people will say the education system is broken. But everybody is concerned about education because that's who educates our children. We give our children to most people give their children to the government schools to teach their children. And you have done a pretty good bit of research. In fact, you have written a book, Crimes of the Educators. I don't know if you can see that, Crimes of the Educators. Tell me, what got you involved in all of this?
Well, it really started back in probably 2011 when I figured out that they were working on something called Common Core, this set of national standards that Obama was trying to force on all the states. And that was really alarming to me, the idea that we would have a national education system where the federal government and people we couldn't elect or remove from office would be in charge of running the schools. And so I dug and I was more and more troubled by what I saw. And then finally, a few years later, I got a phone call asking if I would work on this book with Dr. Sam Blumenfeld. Dr. Blumenfeld had been working on education issues for 50 years. He was very, very well known. Even people who didn't like him respected him for his work. And he spent literally 50 years of his life trying to rescue as many children as possible from illiteracy. Wrote 12 books on education, and he was getting up there in years. He was in his late 80s. And so for me, that was a huge honor to have the opportunity to work with him. He also was a regular writer for the New American Magazine, primarily on education issues. And so I jumped at the opportunity.
Let me say, I heard him speak one time years ago, and he was, I'll never forget it, he said, if somebody came to America from another planet and was evaluating our education system, they would say, well, maybe maybe you're not, maybe you don't have the best facilities that you could have. And we would say, no, we've got the best facilities in the world, the best buildings, the best everything. And this Martian would say, well, maybe you don't pay teachers enough, or maybe you don't spend enough money. Oh, no. We pay our teachers better than anybody in the world. We spend more money than anybody in the world in education. And anyway, it goes through some of those things, and finally you realize that, we're doing everything on paper that it looks like should be done. So there's something else.
There is. And that's really what we get into in this book. We get into the history of who set up the government school system, why they set it up, what their agenda was. And in fact, we know a lot about it. We don't have to speculate or theorize. If you go on Wikipedia, you'll see John Dewey's listed as the kind of the founding father of the American public education system. And the guy was open about the fact that he was a socialist. He went to the Soviet Union to see what Lenin was doing, and he thought it was great. He was a humanist. He wanted to undermine the Christian faith and replace it with his religious worldview. And to his credit, he was honest enough to admit that it was a religion. He wrote and signed the first humanist manifesto, which right off the bat they tell you, we believe the universe is self-existing and not created. If you open up your Bible, it says in the beginning, God created. So John Dewey was very open about what he was trying to do and why he wanted to hijack control of the education system. He's been very successful. What we argue here in the subtitle, utopians are using government schools to destroy America's children. It's not just America's children. They're destroying America and liberty and our Constitution and America itself. And that's the reality of what we're facing. And we don't accuse public school teachers of being involved in this. They didn't get into this to dumb down kids or to indoctrinate kids. At least most of them didn't. But they're in a system that does that inherently. That's what it was designed to do.
Yeah, I was going to say, the thing that is so annoying about even talking to people about this is that we all have friends who are school teachers.
Yeah.
Or principals or one thing, and we love them. They're in our community, and I don't know of a school teacher. I don't know of an evil school teacher.
No.
So it's not the school teachers, and most people are like most people. They don't know anything about any of this.
Yeah.
You go to college to learn how to teach, and then you go get a job as a teacher, and you don't know anything about all this behind the scenes stuff.
That's right. And we argue repeatedly within the book and on the interviews we've done since then. Dr. Blumenfeld passed away. But we argue that school teachers are really just as much victims as the students going through this system. Again, the school teachers were taught in their college of education that this is how it's done. The federal courts have said, no, you can't talk about God in the schools. You got to do this, that, or the other. And so the system that has been designed now, and now it's being globalized. I mentioned the national education standards that came through under Obama. You now have the United Nations, UNESCO, the UN Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization working to globalize the schools and to create a global education system where all the kids of the entire world will be dumbed down and indoctrinated with this same propaganda. And if you look at the fruit of it, it's very clear that there's a big problem here. Look at the destruction of the family, the abortions, the drug use, society collapsing all around us. And I would say you can lay most of this at the feet of the government school system.
Yeah, there's got to be a reason that all of these things happen. You have now a lot of people talking about wanting us to be a socialist country. Now we already are, but that's besides the point, I guess, to them. I don't know what more we could do to make them happy, but they are embracing the term socialism. Now, when I was a kid, Miss Jackson in the second grade taught us that she didn't talk about, but she talked about communism and the evils of communism, how terrible that would be. But now, that seems to be kind of what a lot of people want to do.
That's exactly right. If you look at the polling data, most young people, in fact, most people my age, millennials, so-called, are in favor of socialism. And, they could always go check out a socialist country. We had the National Socialism in Germany, where, they started putting people in camps and goose-stepping around and invading their neighbors. We have the International Socialism that we saw in the Soviet Union or Cuba or Communist China, murdered hundreds of millions of people. And the reality is these kids have no idea what that is. They don't understand basic economics. They don't understand the basic principles of liberty. They've been trained to hate America based on a false history that they've been taught. And I don't think our country can survive too much more of this, to be honest.
Yeah, let me get to a couple of text messages. Oh, geez, you just said school teachers don't know anything about education. Invite some teachers to participate instead of conspiracy theorists. No, I didn't say that they don't know anything about education. But
whoever said that, I'm a school teacher too, just so you know. So.
Okay. No, but no, I'm not saying school teachers don't know anything about education. What I said was school teachers don't know anything about this plan that we're talking about, that Alex is talking about. This is done at much higher levels. I hope I never do meet any of these people. But school teachers, as he said, are just as much victims as anybody else.
Yeah.
So.
And the term conspiracy theory is really a ludicrous term to use at this point. Conspiracy, by definition, if you open up your dictionary and get rid of the Pavlovian programming, you'll find that the definition of a conspiracy is secret, more than one person, and evil or immoral intent. This that we're talking about meets some of those criteria, but it's not secret. In fact, the UN tells you what they're doing. They brag about it. I've been giving a talk all over South Carolina and Georgia. I've got another 50 or 60 talks across 33 states, and I'll be showing videos of these people talking about it, talking about the system that we're moving toward. So it's not a conspiracy. By definition, a conspiracy requires secrecy, but it is real. And I'm not saying teachers don't know anything. Teachers know plenty. Unfortunately, the system that has been created is designed, and you can prove this. It's a documented fact. We've got mountains of documentation right here. This book is meticulously footnoted, and we're quoting primary source documents. We're quoting people like John Dewey, people like Horace Mann, people like the Department of Education, people like Arne Duncan, the Secretary of Education for 7 years under Obama. There's no speculation, there's no theories, and there's no conspiracy. This is all fact, and it's well documented. I'd love it if somebody wanted to have a debate or a discussion about it, and I think it's a worthwhile discussion to have, and if any teacher wants to call in, I'd love to talk to them. So.
Well, yeah, unfortunately, a lot of people in small towns don't like to get out front with things like that. Let me see, I got a couple. Smart talk for sure. How is the UN controlling classrooms in the Hart County charter system? A worthwhile discussion.
Well, the UN intends to, and they'll tell you this. Again, we're not speculating. The UN will proudly tell you this. You can go to UNESCO's webpage, you can go to their YouTube channel, you can read the document they ratified in 1990, Education for All. You can read the document they ratified in 2000 in Dakar, the Framework for Education for All. They tell you what they're doing. They want the same learning standards applied in every school all over the planet. And they told us this back in 1946 when they adopted the UN Universal Declaration of Human Rights. In Article 26, they say education shall, not may, it shall further the activities of the United Nations. UNESCO, the UN's education agency, the very first leader of UNESCO, Julian Huxley, the brother of Aldous Huxley, was very open about the fact that the goal of UNESCO was to get control of the education system and, as he put it, unify the world under some sort of political world government. They were putting out pamphlets back in the 40s saying that the schools must be used to combat family attitudes. And today they have what they call a World Core curriculum, believe it or not. The resemblance in the name World Core Curriculum and Common Core is more than coincidental, as you can prove. Bill Gates, who actually financed the creation of Common Core, he put $2 billion of his own money. He signed an agreement with UNESCO in 2004. You can read the agreement yourself. They agreed to create a global syllabus, a global master curriculum. And you can read the World Core curriculum right on UNESCO's website. They want this taught in every school on the planet, and they don't hide that fact.
All right, one more before we go to a break. So despite the theory how how had the UN influenced the Hart County charter school system? We need local discussion.
Yep. Well, I don't know the particulars of Hart County. I think this may be the first time I've ever been in this county in my life. I appreciate y'all having me. But I do know how it works more broadly. So Arne Duncan, the Secretary of Education during Obama for 7 years, was very open about this. You can go to the Department of Education's website still today, and cut me off if we've got to go to a break, but you can read the speeches he gave. He gave a speech to UNESCO in 2010 where he said UNESCO was his global partner, and he talked about turning children into green global citizens using the public school system. He talked about how the federal government is increasingly gaining more and more control over the schools, and that was a good thing. He talked about how they were infusing the science, so-called, of sustainability into education curricula from kindergarten through high school seniors. And, again, none of this is hidden. They won't tell you about it on the front page of the New York Times, but it's all out in the open. So that's how they work. They use the Department of Education. They use federal funding to control the decisions that are happening at the state level. What happens at the state level filters down to the local level. And of course, the problem with charter schools is that because they're taking government money, they all have to obey the government mandate. So typically they'll teach Common Core. Typically they'll have a ban on the Bible and prayer and so on.
This is really interesting stuff. Of course it is. We're going to take a break. Call your neighbors and tell them to tune in. We'll be right back.
Hi folks, we're at the Dairy Queen of Hartwell to give breakfast eaters a voice. So how'd you fellas like your Dairy Queen breakfast?
Oh, they're mighty fine.
Excellent.
The best breakfast in town.
Good breakfast.
How do you like high taxes?
I don't like them too good.
I don't like them in the local level or any other part of government.
Don't like them at all.
I don't like high taxes.
4 out of 4 breakfast eaters choose Dairy Queen food over high taxes. And Ray, how do you like Backtalk Live?
Backtalk Live.
Leroy, I bought this house and I need a little bit of advice. What do you think about these windows?
Oh, you're going to have these replaced. You need to call Herring, Gutter, and Insulation.
What about the siding?
Same thing. They can do that. Herring, Gutter, and Insulation.
Leroy, how's that insulation?
It's terrible. You need to call Herring, Gutter, and Insulation.
Get on up that ladder and check them gutters for me, Leroy.
I don't know, Tom. I'm pretty scared of heights.
Oh, get on up that ladder.
Some things are just better left to the professionals. Whether it's insulation, gutters, window replacement, or siding, Herring Gutter and Insulation has the expertise to make your home look new again.
You know, Leroy, I've been thinking. I believe I'm gonna call Herring, Gutter, and Insulation. Thank you anyway, though.
Wait, where you going?
Welcome back to Backtalk Live. Tom Hardigree and Alex Newman. Alex, when I've talked about this on the show before. Of course, I went through the school system when the state controlled the school system. The federal government didn't have anything to do with it. When I was very young, I guess I was in about middle school when the federal government started getting involved. And incidentally, I've always thought that the big debate about prayer in school, people either for it or against it. But the fact is, if the federal government would get out of education and let the states have it, then it wouldn't be an issue anymore, because the state of Georgia could pray to Jesus if they wanted to. The state of Alabama could pray to Buddha if they wanted to, and all the rest. And it wouldn't have anything to do with the federal government.
And that's actually exactly what the founders intended. The Constitution does not authorize any federal involvement in education whatsoever. And so just to be perfectly clear, they added in the 10th Amendment. They said if there's no authority to do these things, if the powers are not delegated to the United States, they're reserved for the states or for the people. And the Supreme Court, when they removed prayer and when they removed the Bible from the schools, they said it was a violation of the First Amendment. Well, if you go read your First Amendment, or if you learned it in government school, you'd know that it says Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion. In fact, many of the states at the time of the founding had established religions. So clearly they weren't talking about state legislatures or local school districts. And I would go even a step further, and I would say that I think we need to reconsider the idea of having the government in charge of education in the first place, whether that be the state or the federal government. You know, if you had told somebody 200 years ago that the government would one day pass a law that you would have to hand your children over to the government to be educated, they would have looked at you like you were an alien from outer space. It would have been totally ridiculous. You know, the Bible's filled with references to education, and it's always in the context of parents educating their children, or the churches, never Caesar, right? So Karl Marx promoted this idea of government education. The guy who brought it to America was a guy named Horace Mann. He had been over to Prussia, where the Prussian dictator was using this government school system that he had created to brainwash his subjects and make them obedient little statists. And so he pioneered this idea, but prior to that, government schools didn't exist. It would have sounded completely outrageous to a parent that you would hand over your child to the government. And in fact, Americans, long before we had a government school system, were far more educated than they are today. And there's mountains of evidence to show that. Lots of literacy data. In some places, almost all Americans could read. In Boston, it was almost 100% of Americans could read and write. They knew their Bibles, they knew the economics, they knew the history of the world, they could speak Latin, they could translate from Greek. And we did it all without a government school system, much less a $1.3 trillion government school system. And it was mostly parents taught their kids how to read with simple tools. And you know, today, according to the federal government's own data, half of Americans can't read. That's disgraceful. That's shameful. And anybody who thinks that's an accident, you know, I've got some really nice land in Nebraska, some beachfront property. You can talk to me after the show.
All right, let's see, we got one here. I would like scriptural references when attempting to justify theory by the Bible. Which verse says, hand your children over to the government for education? Let's not pervert Christianity.
That's my point exactly. There is absolutely no scripture that says hand your children over to the government. And there are many, many scriptures that emphasize the importance of parents teaching their children. You know, there's endless verses. You know, fathers, do not provoke your children to anger, but bring them up in the fear and the admonition of the Lord. And there's a lot of references to education in the Bible too that will make you realize what we have today masquerading as education is no education at all. If you go to Proverbs 1:7, for example, it'll tell you that the fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge. If you go to Proverbs, I think it's 9:7, it'll tell you that the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. And yet the Lord is not welcome in the schools today. How can you possibly have wisdom or knowledge if you don't have the fear of the Lord? And in the schools today, all across the United States, they're teaching with these next generation science standards. It's like the Common Core of science, same people developed it. They're teaching the kids that you came from slime that turned into a fish, that turned into a monkey, that turned into an ape and a person, and that there was no God involved, and you know, all this nonsense. And so, you know, the kids are teaching the children things that are fundamentally at odds with even just the basics of a sound education. Mm-hmm. So I agree with the person writing. There is no scriptural support whatsoever for government schools. God defined the purpose of government in Romans 13. Punish evil and protect good. And God defined evil. You know, don't murder, don't steal, right? So we know what the role of government is, and nowhere in God's word does it say the government ought to set up schools and educate children. It's just, it's a new idea, it's a revolutionary idea, and I think it was a flawed idea.
All right, Proverbs 9:7, he that reproveth a scorner getteth to himself shame, and he that rebuketh a wicked man getteth himself a blot.
Okay, so I've got the wrong one, but it's in Proverbs 9. If you search a little harder, you'll see that the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. So, yeah.
Yeah, well, it's just changed. You know, a lot of it has changed. I mean, it used to be that, I mean, I know that I wasn't in the second, third, and fourth grade. I wasn't, you know, into all of the things that I am now. But I just do remember the values that they taught. Almost all of my teachers taught, you know, that communism was a bad thing, that just a whole different set of values, right from wrong. And I don't know what they teach now, but what you see out in the world doesn't look good. You know, I don't know how the kids do in math or any of that, but I know that, just take, for example, the war between the states. Now, most people think, I believe you'd agree, I think everybody would agree, most people think that war was fought over slavery And they seem to have this idea, I guess if they think about it even ankle deeply, I guess what they think is that the people in the North thought, well, there are some plantation owners in the South who own slaves, and we just cannot tolerate that. We have got to ride down there and, kill them if we have to make sure that those 3 to 5% of the population in the South don't get to own slaves. Now, how many 17-year-olds, 18-year-olds do you know that would walk down from Massachusetts, walk down to South Carolina to find somebody to fight about slavery? Or how many young 17, 18-year-old guys from the South would say, I don't really know anybody that has slaves, but I know there are some plantation owners around here that do, and I want to protect their right to have slaves. So I'm gonna march up to Virginia and get shot at and shoot at other people so that these people can. I guess that's what people think, must have happened. So anyway, there was a time when people didn't think that. There was a time when people understood that all wars have something to do with money. And the motivation behind that, President Lincoln was not against slavery before the war started. It was not until it ended. It's kind of like old George Bush Jr. said that there was weapons of mass destruction. Well, you have to have, if you're going to have a war, you got to have something to get people behind it. But people don't think about these things logically anymore. And, that was what we did.
That's right.
I'm assuming that they don't do that in schools anymore. I haven't been there in a while.
No. Well, I can tell you just from what I've seen, it's they're not learning any real history at all. One of the people working on this project with us, this special report we did in the New American, Rescuing Our Children, Dr. Duke Pesta, he runs the Freedom Project Academy where I teach, and he's also a professor of English literature at the University of Wisconsin. He surveys his new students as they come in. He said consistently over a period of a decade, more than half of the students coming into his class believe America invented slavery. And of course, they didn't wake up believing such an absurdity. They got it from their government schools. Little do they realize that slavery has been with humanity almost from the dawn of time. I mean, it's been ubiquitous in virtually every culture and civilization, and it was the principles that America was founded on. The idea that all men are created equal and that they're endowed by their creator with certain inalienable rights. It was these principles that laid the foundation for abolishing slavery all over the world. But the kids have it exactly backwards because they're being indoctrinated in the schools. And we're now several generations deep into this indoctrination. So you were one of the last, I think, very fortunate generations in that you probably had a decent, godly education. I would say that there were still some serious flaws in it, and we've all suffered from that. But it's been getting worse and worse to the point where now they have, drag queen story hour. They're bringing in men in dresses, wearing demon horns, reading to the kids, LGBT stories about homosexual worms, and they're teaching them fake history. They're teaching them that the gas that they exhale is some sort of toxic pollution that's going to cause climate change, and we're all going to die if we don't give the UN permission to tax this. It's ludicrous, but it's what they're teaching little children as fact.
And I don't know why we have this thing that's the theory of evolution is taught as the fact of evolution. It's a theory.
That's right. It's actually fundamental to John Dewey's religion. If you read the second plank of his Humanist Manifesto, you'll see that we believe humanity came about as a result of continuous processes called evolution. And so this was fundamental to John Dewey's theology, and he wanted to undermine Christianity in the United States. He wanted to undermine what he considered to be the individualistic nature of America. And so he set out with a deliberate plan. We actually republished one of his essays in this book, The Primary Education Fetish, where he explains, change has to come gradually. To force it unduly would jeopardize its final success by favoring a violent reaction. That's the language of a conspirator. But he had a very deliberate agenda to turn the schools into engines of anti-Christian propaganda. And in fact, if you go back to the very beginning, the people who set up the public school system had that exact same agenda.
All right, we'll think about this while we go to break. I just don't see the ideology espoused here applies at all in any manner to our local school system. Is this guy in a book tour or something? I had a decent, godly education in Hart County near a generation after you, old man. You aren't that much younger than me, hot shot. What's ludicrous is this cat has no idea about education in Hart County. We'll take a break and then we'll come back and talk about some of those things and see if we can get somebody else kind of riled up. See you.
Tom, I can't wait to see Gina's new store.
Lee, don't let me go overboard in here, please. Lee, she's got beautiful jewelry. She's got men's wallets.
Oh, yeah, I've been looking for one.
Why don't you go ahead and get that and see what happens.
Tom, you need some t-shirts, man. Simply Southern. Look at all this.
Oh, yeah, man. I think I'll get a t-shirt, Lee. I think I'll get one.
Tom, they've got totes, monogrammed, insulated and uninsulated.
Yeah, man. I got to have this one. Lee, they've even got monogrammed handbags.
Ooh, wow.
Yeah. I think your wife would like this one.
Sure. Tom, they even had a pet section. Pet deodorizers, pet scarves, clothes.
Leroy, they got strutting cotton, turn rows, and southern sipping t-shirts. Well, thank you, Leroy.
Tom, she's got a line of Bible covers and Bibles, Christian books, even books for kids.
And my favorite, the King James Version. That's the one that Moses read. Leroy, they got this spirit wear, Hart County stuff, Georgia Bulldogs, some Clemson stuff, and they got these neat towels.
For all of your gift-giving needs, visit G's Southern Traditions, located at 36 North Forest Avenue in downtown Hartwell. And we can monogram almost anything.
Well, looks like you did go a little crazy, didn't you?
Frankly, my friend, I don't give a.
The Hartwell Housing Authority features decent, safe, and sanitary housing for low-income families. Each of the 7 apartment complexes are located in the Hartwell city limits and feature 24-hour maintenance, landscaping, as well as 24-hour surveillance. You can choose apartments from 1 bedroom all the way up to 4 bedrooms. All apartments are periodically renovated and stoves and refrigerators are furnished. Gas, water, sewage, and garbage pickup are also included. The Hartwell Housing Authority. Applications may be picked up daily.
You may not know this, but your business is a prime target for cyber criminals. Without proper protection, cyber attacks can decrease employee productivity, compromise important business files, and put your business at risk. Tech Office is an easy-to-use cybersecurity and productivity solution that protects your business against the evolving cyber threat landscape. This advanced business software suite includes malware protection. Ensure your devices are secure with class-leading endpoint security. Cloud backup to ensure you never lose important files to ransomware attacks or hardware failure. A password manager to create and remember your passwords. And even a network analyzer to ensure devices stay connected to your office network. Our friendly technicians are available around the clock to assist with your most difficult business technical challenges. Tech Office helps keep your business running smoothly. Contact us today and get the best protection and support available.
I invite people all the time. Oh, we back? Okay, welcome back to Backtalk Live. Let's see, we were talking before the break. I said we would get back to this text message that I had a decently godly education in Hart County. A generation after me, and to be honest, it could have been. And I've known, I tried to get a private school started in Hart County in the late 80s, and I found out that, boy, I tell you what, I got run over like a steamroller. I found out that there are, a lot of people that don't appreciate anybody criticizing the government schools. And it's unfortunate that they sometimes take it personally, because I know a lot of good Christian people who are school teachers. A lot of them are my friends. I'm not saying that they are a part of this system to undermine themselves and the students. I'm not saying that at all. I'm saying that, you hear about the deep state, you hear about all that. There are people in high places that have ideas for us that we don't agree with. We're a part of a problem that we did not create. We are caught up in it, and that's what Alex is talking about. This problem that we're caught up in, and we need to recognize it before it's too late, if it isn't already. I went to school in the early 1970s. I graduated with a degree in economics in 1974 from Georgia Southern College. And I've told this before, I never heard of Milton Friedman in 1974. I think he got the Nobel Prize in 75 or 76. Now you would think that a college would have heard of him by 1974, but all I ever heard about were the Keynesian guys. And today, I look at local government, state government, federal, it seems like nobody even is aware that there is something called free market economics. It seems like that nobody knows about it. It's always, we have a problem, the government needs to solve our problem. That is not good economics.
It's not. It's terrible economics. In fact, the government tends to create many more problems than they solve. And again, there is a role for government, right? Government has a role, as our founding fathers said. It's a self-evident truth that God gave us rights, and they said we actually institute a government to protect these rights. So our right to life, our right to private property, our right to liberty, to speak freely, to worship God according to the dictates of our conscience. That's the duty of government, to protect those things. Once the government starts getting involved in wealth redistribution, once they get involved and start, trying to run people's lives, trying to tell farmers how to farm, trying to tell business owners how to run their businesses, they've stepped outside the bounds of what government is supposed to do. And so we should expect big problems. And that's exactly what we see. In fact, I teach advanced economics to high school seniors. It's a lot of fun. And economics is really not all that complicated. I mean, it's common sense. It's easy. It's basic to understand, and you can verify this. If you think centrally planned economies work well, all you have to do is go look at some. Cuba's 90 miles off the shores of Florida. You could go to North Korea. You could go to Zimbabwe. There's plenty of communist countries that you can go to and examine them. And in fact, you can examine the correlation between economic freedom and prosperity. What you'll find is that the countries with the freest economies are also by far the wealthiest countries. And this data is very simple to find. It's not mysterious, but because of the indoctrination in the schools, because of the lack of critical thinking being instilled in our children, it becomes very difficult. And so people get emotional rather than actually thinking about these things, using logic, using reason, using evidence. And it's very dangerous. I'm concerned that if we don't address this crisis that we have in education, and don't believe me that there's a crisis in education, the government's own data proves that more than conclusively. There's places in the country, Washington, D.C., for example, more than 2/3 of the adult population is functionally illiterate, according to the State Education Agency report. If we don't get a handle on this, we're going to lose not just our kids, not just our families, but also our churches, our liberties, and our country. So this is an existential crisis.
I got to get caught up on some texts here. Okay, let's see. This is a quote from John Adams. The whole people must take upon themselves the education of the whole people to be willing to bear the expenses of it. There should not be a district of 1 mile square without a school in it, not founded by a charitable individual, but maintained at the public expense of the people themselves.
Oh, that's a fake quote. I mean, there's a lot of fake quotes out there from the Founding Fathers, but the Founding Fathers did not believe in government education. They certainly did not believe in federally controlled education. It's anybody who looks, most of the Founding Fathers were actually homeschooled. And, they learned how to read and write at their homes or from their older siblings, from their parents. A few of them got some help from private tutors and some academies, free market academies, by the way. None of them went to government schools. And some of them later went on to what were then very good universities, Harvard, Princeton, Yale, things like that, which were back then very, very godly Christian schools founded actually to train up ministers of the gospel and advance the kingdom. So it was a totally different world. The Founding Fathers did not believe in government schools, and that is absolutely clear in the historical record.
All right, hang on, because I want to get to these. Let's see. Good teachers and our local system are not part of the problem, as you said. Well, since we're now on farming, yet another bailout for farmers after China tariffs, the Trump presidency obviously is illogical, not using reason, and out of touch with global economics. You know what? I was talking to tariffs are, you know, the last time we had the trade deals, the manufacturing lost. There are always winners and losers in trade deals. And the last one, we lost around 55,000 manufacturers in America. We lost 6 million manufacturing jobs, and it was good for farming. Okay, that was the last round. This round, yes, it's good for manufacturing. It's going to bring jobs back, or if it doesn't, we're going to be able to pay down the debt with the tariffs that we get from China and other places. But it's good for jobs. It's bad for farming. Now, what do? Do you just say, okay, no, I'm not trying to justify Trump. He's giving a bunch of money to farmers. I don't know. I'm not trying to justify any of that, but I'm saying that there are winners and losers in everything. But in the short term, in the long run, if you have a lot of jobs, that means you have a lot of economic activity. That means you're going to have a lot more people who can afford to buy things, and the economy is going to grow. That's just the way it works. And let me see. I'm sorry.
No problem. And to go back and address a couple of text messages earlier, somebody said that I don't know about Hart County schools. That's true. I'm on a national speaking tour right now. I'm going to be going across probably most of the 48 continental United States. I think we'll skip one or two, and there's no way for me to know about the thousands of different counties, but they all have a lot in common. They're all taking their orders from Washington, D.C. today. Something like 46 states initially accepted Common Core, which is the national standards, which are of course aligned with the global education plans that are coming down out of UNESCO. Even the state, and Georgia was one of those, by the way, and even the states that didn't initially accept it, it's coming in through the back door with the textbooks and sneaky stuff going on at the state departments of education. So you don't need to know about every individual county to know what's going on. And as to whether I'm on a book tour or not, no, I'm not on a book tour. I wrote this book several years ago. What I am on is a speaking tour, promoting this idea that we need to rescue our children from indoctrination, from being dumbed down, as a means to not just rescuing our children, which is an important goal in and of itself, but also rescuing our country and rescuing our freedoms.
All right, let me see here. Existential crisis. Yes, we can have this discussion for sure. I'm not sure about that one. Fake quote. Okay, and he has some unflattering things to say about you.
Okay, that's good.
But anyway, these quotes can be looked up on the internet pretty easily. Okay, so anyway, national speaking tour that he says you're clueless about Hart County. Well, you know, the thing is, the government schools are what they are. I mean, that's what we have. That's what most people use. Some people don't. Some people, you know, go to the expense to take their children out of the government schools and put them into private schools or either homeschool. They don't get any kind of tax break or anything, at least in the state of Georgia they don't. So, you know, parents make all these decisions. But the government schools are what they are. And if you look into these things and balance what they're teaching, not in math and not in a lot of other things, but what they're teaching against what you believe, you might find that there are some differences. You might not. But things have changed over the last decades. Things have changed. We don't believe the same things we used to. And I don't know what other better, more obvious common denominator there is than who teaches our children. Because let's face it, people, most folks send their children to school, and when they come home from school, they sit them in front of the television, which is saying about the same thing they said at school. Something, you know, it's worth investigating, I think.
Yeah, and suppose I'm right. So to the gentleman who keeps writing unflattering things about me, suppose I'm right. Do you have your kids in a public school? Suppose I'm right, and they are being dumbed down, and they are being indoctrinated. Where do you think the kids get these ideas? Where do you think the majority of millennials now think socialism is a good idea? Why do you think kids are leaving the churches in massive numbers? Something like 80% of children from Christian homes who go through a government education are going to end up leaving their church, and some will come back eventually. but the numbers, the losses are catastrophic. The kids don't know about the Constitution. They don't even know the principles this country was founded on. That's why they're out there demanding gun control. They're ready to burn down the country. They want to open up the border, abolish ICE, the border agency. This stuff is not just, the kids are not just waking up and coming up with these ideas on their own. This is all part of a deliberate agenda. It can be proven, it can be documented. You can watch the videos. One of the things I do in my presentation that I've been giving around the country is show these people talking in their own words, because I realize some of this is really incredible to people who have not done the research, who've not investigated. So I show the videos of these people saying these things. I show the videos from the United Nations bragging that we're moving toward a global education system that they're going to control. And you know, if you want to argue with them, then you're just simply being an ostrich. You're sticking your head in the sand, and that's not going to help you, and that's not going to help anybody else.
Okay, I'd say it's time. Is it time, Wes, for a break? We'll be right back. Get those cards and letters ready.
On the Train Test Range, you learn what makes our heating and cooling systems so reliable. If there's a breaking point, we'll find it. It's hard to stop a train. Really hard.
Remember, McGee Heating and Air. Comfort you can count on. It's hard to stop a train.
Protect yourself or your loved ones with a personal emergency response system from HTC. Knowing that your loved one can quickly reach help will give everyone more peace of mind. For just $5.99 a month, you can lease the equipment, and 24-hour monitoring costs just $19.99. The personal home safety system includes a wristband or pendant and two-way voice for instant emergency access. Live independently with a personal emergency response system from HTC. Technology you need, people you can trust.
Okay, welcome back to Backtalk Live with Alex Newman. This is the time that I do my real estate commercial, and usually I just say a few things. I've got a house that is just really spectacular that I wanted to show you because the price has been reduced on it. It's one of the nicest houses in Hart County. It's been reduced to $699,000. This is the master bathroom. These are in no particular order, by the way. It's kind of roomy, you know, you could have a meeting in there. Of course, this is the front of the house. Wanted to show you the interior shots. Well, no, okay. This is the back of the house. It's 2 levels, as you see. That's a nice boathouse. 27 feet off the end of that dock. This is the downstairs, you know, family room. That's some kind of table that they do shuffleboard on. Anyway, it's got two bedrooms down there and a couple of baths. So there's a bar around the area. That's the master bedroom. Just kind of wanted to give you an idea, give you a flavor of what this house is like. It's really, really nice. Then we've got, of course, the the kitchen. And right off the kitchen is a fabulous screen porch with a hanging queen-size bed and a lot of real cool furniture. All the nicest appliances. There's the screened-in porch. Now this thing is huge. It's nice. This is beautiful. You haven't even seen all right, there's the lower deck overlooking the lake. It's just, I don't know what to tell you, people. I don't know why you don't go ahead and buy it. And of course the dock, as you see on the other side there, you can see that hill. That is mostly core property there. There won't be any houses or docks or anything over there. Then we have, there's the one interior shot of the main family room, or the great room. There it is. That's the one I wanted you to see. It just shows that this is just a fabulous, fabulous house. $699,000. You can even rent it out on that VRBO website and get $3,500 a week for it. So figure it out, people. Anyway, I work for Alan Powell and Red Clay Properties, and I would appreciate it if you'd give me a call for any real estate need you have. All right, we got, let's see, hang on here, Alex. All right, we got this guy knows exactly what he's talking about, and anyone that thinks he is wrong is fooling themselves. The federal government screws up everything they get involved with. Wake up, people. Your children's future depends on it.
Thank you. Much appreciated.
And this was another text about real estate, really. So anyway, we have a problem, and some people agree, some people disagree. I guess I need to just say it over and over that teachers are not the problem. I know teachers. I know them, plenty of teachers very, very well, and they are not the problem. So I remember I should have brought this book. I've still got it. There were these little comic books that came out. The Georgia Department of Education had these books. What they were doing was promoting homosexuality.
Yeah.
And the one that I have was called Daddy Has Two Mommies, and it's a book, explaining all that kind of stuff. And there were some other ones too, but that had nothing to do with teachers. No teacher wanted to teach that kind of stuff, and it was discovered before it disseminated into the system, but it was something that a lot of people disagreed with. But some folks high up the ladder in the Georgia Department of Education thought it would be a good idea. Let's see here. I appreciate that young man's attempt to educate those who have their heads stuck in the sand. He has stirred up the hornets tonight with his factual insights. Thank you, Alex, for sharing this needful information.
Thank you very much. I sure appreciate that. And it's true, a lot of people get emotional about this issue. Maybe my wife is a school teacher, or maybe my mom is a school teacher, and so it's an emotional issue. But as Tom has said repeatedly, and as I've said repeatedly, school teachers are not the problem, generally speaking. Really, we're talking about, to use a term in the popular lexicon today, the educational deep state, if you will. The people behind the scenes that really decide the policies that govern all of our schools. These are the people at UNESCO. These are the people at the U.S. Department of Education that we don't see. And they've created the system to do exactly what it's doing. So, I hope people will get over the emotion. Don't let emotion cloud your good judgment, and recognize that, when we talk about this, even if we were to be completely successful and get rid of this bad system, we would still need teachers, right? Teachers would still have very good jobs teaching children, but they wouldn't be caught up in this straitjacket, being forced to do things that violate their conscience, being forced to teach children things that just aren't true, being forced to teach children reading using quack methodology that we've known since the 1840s produces illiteracy. And we could get back to being a well-educated, highly literate, godly society that respects individual freedom, that respects difference of opinion, rather than the situation that we're in now, where society is really on the verge of collapse. Look around you. Look at the hatred in the streets. Look at the rioting, the Antifa, the hatred in Congress. Look at Congress, for crying out loud. These people didn't elect themselves. It's a product of the public school system. So.
Let me just say, I got some shield for right-wing extremism.
See, these are just all ad hominem attacks, and that's what people do when they don't have a logical response. That's what people do when they're being governed by their emotions and ruled by their passions. If you have a logical response, if you have evidence that you'd like to present, I'm very happy to hear it. But just throwing out names at people, it's really silly. And frankly, I think it speaks volumes about the quality of your argument. If you had a good argument, you would make it, and you wouldn't say things like right-wing extremism. This is not a right-wing or a left-wing issue. Left-wing parents want their kids to learn how to read and write and do math as well. And under the Common Core, they're not going to do that. And that's something that ought to concern all of us. If that doesn't concern you, I think there's something wrong with you.
Teacher unions run the education system. Follow the money and you will know why they fight so hard against privatizing schools. Too much accountability for some of the people working in the current system.
That's a big part of it, and Dr. Sam Blumenfeld, who co-wrote this book with me, he wrote a whole book about the National Education Association. I really highly recommend it to people who want to know where a lot of this is coming from. It's called NEA, Trojan Horse in American Education. And, it's bad, but you don't know how bad it is. I mean, this entity has been infested with communists and subversives and people who were trying to actually overthrow the foundations of our country going back generations.
All right, this is going to be the last quote, I think. Logic has been presented the entire show, and no facts or biblical scripture can be quoted. I'm not sure about what that meant, but anyway, it's just something that you have to look at. If you're going to be a rational, logical person, you have to look at both sides of issues. I talk about it all the time on this show. If you just say no, you know, like people I've heard, I was raised in the government schools. It was good enough for me. It's good enough for my children. If that's your argument, or if your argument is, well, my Aunt Doris, which my Aunt Doris was a school teacher, my Aunt Doris was a school teacher, she was a fine person, and I don't appreciate anybody, you know, if you're going to have that as your position, then I don't know that you can be helped. But if you're logical, rational, and if you're willing to read something other than the sports section, then you can pick up some of these things and read it. You don't have to read the whole book. There's not going to be a final exam, but you can find out some things that are concerning.
And I hope people will do their own research. Don't take my word for it. Most of you watching this program don't know who I am. Don't believe anything I've said. Whip out your smartphone, go to your favorite search engine, and start doing this research yourself. You can go to thenewamerican.com. You can read all of these articles for free. You can send me an email. I'll be happy to send you any documentation you would like. And use your head. Again, you know, to the people who responded with this emotionalism, with these nasty words, you know, I'd ask you very kindly, and I would pray for you that you would look at this rationally and logically, look at the evidence, and then come to a conclusion. Don't let your emotions and your passions cloud your good judgment.
That's good advice for anybody, anytime. Alex Newman, I tell you what, I appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
This has been a fun hour for me.
Yeah, I appreciate you having me on. It's been a great hour for me too, despite the verbal abuse. I sure appreciate it, Tom. Thank you for having me.
Well, that's kind of part of it.
Yeah.
You know, my father always told me to don't talk about politics or religion. That's my two favorite things.
Right, me too. So.
You know, so I don't know what I'm supposed to do, but it does make a lot of people mad. I know that that I have people that, you know, tell me all the time, oh, so-and-so said this, you know, and said that about something that you said on your show or somebody on your show said. And, you know, I'm sorry, but the phone lines are always open. And for those of you who strongly disagree or think that there's some, you know, something going on here, you're invited to come on the show. You can always call or text or any of that kind of thing, obviously. But if you ever want to come on the show to present the other side, if there is another side, to present it, please come on. You know, you'll be treated just as courteously as Alex has been treated, and we'll have a good time. I want to thank all of the sponsors, the Dairy Queen, G's, Southern Traditions, Hartwell Housing Authority, McGee Heating and Air, and Herring Gutter Installation, for putting this thing on. I hope you'll thank them for allowing this. Larry, by the way, I hope this show was good for you, my friend, because last week you were a little disappointed. This week you can't be. Anyway, thanks to everybody. Appreciate you watching. We'll see you next week. Next week, Mike Griffin is going to be coming on to talk about the heartbeat bill. Larry, you ought to like that one. We haven't talked about abortion yet, but we're going to do it next week. See you then.